Hidden among the armies of sword fighters, mages, and knights are a handful of units that do something completely different. These units don't just fit snugly into the ranks alongside their blue unit buddies, they look at conventional rules of the engine and twist, subvert, or outright ignore it. Today we're talking about experimental and unique Fire Emblem units, aka the ones that turn conventional strategy on its head. Maybe it's a character who can shapeshift into other units, or a devious pair of soldiers whose gimmick centralizes entirely around a mechanic only they have access to. These units don't just be powerful, they be different. Let's get started. Fire Emblem 1 and Fire Emblem 3, and not Fire Emblem 11 and Fire Emblem 12 because I don't feel like talking about them, Zane. Even among the Divine Dragons in the series, Zane carries a ton of uniqueness, and this is due to being a dragon but having no stone to use, and so his class is Freelancer. This puts him in an interesting position. He doesn't operate like the rest of the human units in the game, but actually can't turn into a dragon, so what does he actually do? Zane has the unique ability in his games to transform into an ally unit's class as well as copying their stats. In Fire Emblem 1, this also included max HP, but he does keep his current HP. This did change in FE3, where he keeps his own HP after transforming. This nerf makes him more of a player phase nuke since he will not be able to tank hits nearly as well as the unit he's copying. So whether you want to transform him into another Marth, an extra healer on deck, or a flyer, he can do all of it, except transform into Tiki. And here's a fun fact that 99% of us didn't know about until this video. In FE1 at least, Zane as Marth can recruit units as well. Watch Est run up to Zane thinking he's Marth. This is because Est is actually, presumably, trying to reach the nearest Lord class, not Marth's character. Credits to Darman for testing this and providing the footage. Zane's transformation lasts for around 5 to 7 turns in FE1, and in FE3, 7 plus 1 to 3 extra turns. Also, transformed Zane doesn't gain any EXP as he's using stats that aren't his, meaning kills he takes are lost EXP that another unit could have used. Base Zane has very low stats, with the idea that he's supposed to be transformed as much as possible, so there's a unique risk with his overwhelmingly positive reward. Fire Emblem Gaiden. Villagers. In Fire Emblem Gaiden, the villager stands out for its incredibly unique branching promotional paths. Instead of the typical unpromoted to promoted line in FE1, villagers start off as low stat units with then access to soldier, mercenary, cavalier, archer, or mage, giving crazy flexibility to suit the player's needs or preferences. Like the experimental departure of Gaiden itself from Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, the villagers really represent this concept from a unit perspective. Villagers can let you plan extremely far ahead since they're meant to be long-term investments you get from the start of the game. Your choices for Tobin, Gray, and Cliff, and then Atlas later, will pay off from the early game, the mid game, the late game, and the end game, especially if you go through the mercenary class line ending in the all-powerful Dreadfighter. Not only is this class the best in the game in my opinion, but you can also perform the Dreadfighter loop. Dreadfighters actually can promote back into villagers after level 10, which lets you take a villager through another class line. Not that you really need to do this to complete the game or to win, but it's certainly a funny quirk. Villagers would be revisited in spirit with Sacred Stones' trainee units, Ewan, Amelia, and Ross. Then the villager class properly came back with Donal and Mozu when Awakening and Fates came around respectively. And when Echoes remade Gaiden, the game added the Pitchfork, which reclasses any unit who uses it into a villager, blowing the doors wide open for unit customization. Characters like Python and Mycen could become Dreadfighters, and if you're getting too many sword users, you could pitchfork someone like Dean to get him into a Bow Knight for access to Hunter's Volley, switching your close quarters combatants into devastating distance demons. Everyone loves an underdog story and versatile customization, so villagers are the best of both worlds really. The last non-remake to do this was Fates. Both Three Houses and Engage, despite having villagers as classes, didn't have a true playable one. Three Houses kind of just all has villagers, since all units start as commoners or nobles, and Engage did have a villager character in John, but he was a healer, and not a villager. So unless an older game gets remade, we're left to wait for the next true villager in line. Fire Emblem Awakening's Einherjar. The Einherjar, the spirits of Fire Emblem Legacy characters inhabiting cards, are bonus units you can play as DLC rewards and as Street Pass recruitments. In Fire Emblem Awakening, the Street Pass feature on the Nintendo 3DS enabled players to exchange data by passing by others who have the game and Street Pass activated. This interaction introduces other players as custom teams to your world map, offering opportunities to view their stats, purchase some items, engage in battles, recruit them by trying to persuade the avatar to join your team by paying gold with the cost scaling based on the unit's stats, or just dismiss the team outright. This method could recruit not only other Robins as Einherjars for battle, but also 120 different Einherjars, specifically the kind with their official art from the older games. The other 17 Einherjars were separate from Street Pass, being fancy DLC rewards, totaling up to 137 extra playable units, but you could only hold 20 at a time. Of course, the uniqueness of an avatar in Herjar was left to the player, but the rest of them were designed as truly unique units with very deliberate, pseudo-personal skills to better reflect their source material in a way the base roster doesn't have. But then again, a lot of characters just had kind of loosely related kits, and you need to stretch an interpretation as to why that character had certain skills. For example, DLC Palla was very unique, as she was given Rally Strength and Counter, 2 skill unlocks for the male-only warrior class, making her quite a standout unit for rally support. Also, they gave her Soul, the hero skill, which connects her to her and her sister's appearance in Gaiden. Palla gets Soul, Katria gets Astra, and Est gets Luna. Lewin had standard classes for a Sage in Magic +2, Focus, Rally Magic, and Tome Fair, but was also given Gamble, a fighter skill to better reflect his personality, and he also equips Forseti, which is a tome exclusively found on him or in the Infinite Regalia DLC. Spot Pass Leaf was a trickster, but was given Movement +1 as an homage to movement stars in Thracia 776, and DLC Leaf was given Underdog, the villager skill, to reference Leaf growing up in Fianna Village, and I personally headcanon the second reason is that his story is an underdog one. Eldigan was a DLC exclusive paladin who oddly never had a unique art made for him, but was given Swordfarer, a Swordmaster skill, as an homage to him having S rank in swords and wielding the Mistletoe in genealogy, as well as Charm, a Lord skill to reflect his 5 authority stars as a boss. You can even find uniqueness among less story-relevant characters like Mulder having HP +5, a fighter skill as a reference to his HP growth being tied at 70% with Null, who isn't a Spot Pass unit, being the highest for a magic user in Sacred Stones. Braum has Underdog as a unique skill because he's literally a guy in a village in Tellius. There are dozens and dozens of nods to the source material that you could talk about for a long time. Gale Force Jomke referencing the combination of a cost, follow-up, and adept, a trio of skills to make Jomke an offensive nuke that will try his hardest to kill any enemy, Nurgle with Life Taker to steal Quintessence. I actually cannot stop writing in this part of the script, so I will just stop right here, but I will probably make a video on this topic down the line. The uniqueness is self-explanatory. The experimental nature of Street Pass as a function itself was also remarkable. It iterated off the DS's multiplayer features, but did much more than what the DS provided. Street Pass allowed for a player to show off their teams to someone else, which was really cool due to the skill expression and customization that Awakening provided. This was awesome to share with friends. You could create entire armies of avatars for fun playthroughs, adding a social dynamic to Fire Emblem never before seen in the West, at least on such a large scale beyond just synchronous PvP in FEGBA and asynchronous PvP in the DS games. And not only could avatars themselves help you, they even had their own item shops for difficult to acquire items. The amount of social mechanics and creativity with the hardware's capabilities was truly remarkable. Fire Emblem Fates, Orochi and Niles. I want to highlight both Orochi and Niles for the Fates section for their unique abilities to capture units, remixing an entire mechanic formerly exclusive to Thracia 776 into command skills that provide them exceptional utility as units and opening up so many possibilities for strategy. In Fates, capture is a unique mechanic that allows you to recruit certain enemy units into your own army. To use it, you must meet 2 basic requirements. First, your My Castle must have a jail facility built with at least 1 open slot, and 2, you need to deploy a unit with the Capture command, a personal skill exclusive to Niles in Conquest and Orochi in Birthright. The process is fairly straightforward, but with a few quirks. When using the Capture command, the chosen unit initiates combat without support bonuses from pair-up or adjacent allies, and the action carries a small accuracy penalty of -10 hit. If the attack successfully defeats an enemy, that unit is not permanently killed, but is instead sent to your jail. You don't receive their equipment, but you do get the option to recruit a copy of them as a usable unit between chapters. Not every enemy can be captured. Story-critical characters, other root player units, and non-human enemies like Faceless, Golems, Wolfskins, Kitsune, and Valet Invaders are all immune to capture. In other words, the mechanic is limited to generic humanoid enemies that don't serve major narrative roles. Once a unit is jailed, you have 2 ways to recruit them. You could bribe them with materials requested during a jail visit, or you can attempt to persuade them using the unit currently assigned to jail duty. And if it fails, you must wait before trying again, or opt to bribe them on a separate visit. Bribing guarantees their recruitment, but costs resources. So why go through the trouble? Capturing enemies provides access to classes that may not be available to your current army due to the Hoshido/Nor root divide. Even more importantly, some enemy units come with rare skill combinations or high base stats that can't easily be replicated through reclassing or inheritance. For example, it's possible to recruit enemy archers with Counter, units with multiple breaker skills, powerful rally combinations. These capturable bosses often serve as efficient pre-built units for lunatic difficulty players. A lot of Fates units have personal skills that taper off as stats start to become more inflated, but Niles and Orochi's have a personal skill centralized around an entire mechanic that has value from the early game to the end. What's even more memorable about this mechanic is that it's not even mandatory to survive lunatic mode. It is just another option that deepens the strategic planning of a run. 3 houses. Yuritsa. Admittedly, it's a bit difficult to try and find the most quote-unquote experimental 3 houses unit simply due to how flexible each unit is. A lot of characters end up feeling similar in the endgame. Like FE4, there are a lot of new things 3 houses tries out, making the whole game feel experimental in a ton of different ways. So as far as units in 3 houses are concerned, my pick goes to Yuritsa. As a unit, Yuritsa has access to the exclusive Death Knight class, a physically oriented Dark Knight that trades Black and Dark Tome Fare for Lance Fare, which has good synergy with his A+ rank in Lances and his Scythe of Sariel. Mastering Death Knight also grants Yuritsa the counter-attack skill, allowing him to strike back against enemies no matter the range, all without needing external support like the Retribution Gambit or the Chalice of Beginnings, and the latter being DLC. This combination actually gives players a reason to not put Yuritsa in Wyvern Lord and instead keep him in his signature class. Yuritsa can also equip the Mastermind skill to double weapon and class EXP earned, which is otherwise locked to Lysithea as her personal. And this tends to be a skill reserved for low base stat but high growth units anyway, which is absolutely not the case for Yuritsa, who is loaded with stats right out the gate. And to top it all off, he comes with a budding talent in flying that unlocks Darting Blow, making him the only male unit with access to it outside of male New Game Plus Byleth. All in all, Yuritsa is a unique and ridiculous unit to play with, only hindered by his exclusivity to Edelgard's root and his low growths and charm. Fun fact, Yuritsa actually is free DLC. He was initially not playable in the base game, but was later added in an update, then given extra support conversations in later waves, which is pretty remarkable compared to the other DLC unit we got in Anna, who was effectively just stapled onto Wave 3 with 0 support conversations. It was really enjoyable to learn how creative the developers are willing to get with their own game, and how they're willing to make characters who can break the game's own rules. This kind of experimentation on the developer's part encourages experimentation on the part of the player. That spirit of customization and innovation is what makes these units so memorable. So which experimental unit was your favorite? Did I miss one that you think deserves the spotlight? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to hear which characters changed the way you play. And I did intentionally leave quite a bit of solid candidates out because I'm thinking of making a follow-up video to this one. So state your case for a character that you think deserves it, and it might earn a spot on this list next time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.